To get to these steps each week, we do a review, and we begin at step 1, which we said is the foundation of recovery. And I always, think how blessed we are to have the opportunity of the first step. Not to just to have it happen to us, because none of us set out to become powerless over alcohol, but to have the opportunity to know that we're alcoholics, and as we compare ourselves to the many people who will never realize they're alcoholics. As we say that once we have a problem, we don't really understand the exact nature of it. For a period of time, we go through this. And we were fortunate that we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's in Alcoholics Anonymous that we can find what is the problem. And we find out, as we looked at the first part of the book, our problem was twofold. We had a physical allergy coupled with a mental obsession. And these two things make us powerless over alcohol. This is the first step of recovery. As we look at this, Dr. Silkworth talks about the physical allergy, and he says this: we have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. That once the alcoholic takes a drink of alcohol, any alcohol whatsoever into his system, something occurs, that it doesn't occur in the average temperate drinker. And once an alcoholic takes a drink, he experiences a phenomenon of craving, a craving that is beyond the control of the mind. And that's a very, that's really important. I don't think we look at sometimes. Many times we say, I'm going to take a drink, but I'm going to control it with my mind. I'm going to just take 2 and stop. There's 2 things you're going to do if you got a drink. You got to start and you got to stop. Starting is easy. See, and both of these things have to be done with the mind. See, you start with the mind, and you have to stop with the mind. But in the case of an alcoholic, something happens in between those 2 drinks. In between those 2 drinks, we develop a phenomenon of craving. And it's a physical thing, and it's beyond the control of the mind. So in this case, because of the physical allergy, every time we drink, we trigger a phenomenal craving, so we can't drink safely. And because of the mental obsession, then we can't really say quit drinking. We can quit, but this obsession will make us start over again. So these 2 things makes us powerless over alcohol. Then it comes to the second step. If the problem is powerless, the solution is power. And it's the second step is come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity, can remove the obsession. And then we believe this is the solution to the problem. And all we have to do is to believe, and we're on our way. We don't have to have faith in this thing. And it's easy for us to believe in this power because we can see it working in the lives of other people. We hear many other people say, this happened to me. And if we have come to these 2 conclusions, she said she was read tonight. If we have run over the first part of the book, we saw the description of the alcoholic, the chapter of the agnostic, our adventures before and after. These things, this first section of the book should have showed us these 2 steps. Our book shows us the problem and the solution. And if that's the case, we are now at step 3. And step 3 is the beginning of the real recovery program. Step 3 through 12 is a planned program of action, a practical program of action, rather, that leads to this power that overcomes the powerlessness. The first thing we do in this practical program of action is to make a decision. And then once we made this decision to go this way, there were some actions that we had to take. And we began to go through this series of actions. The first was an inventory to find out the things that blocked us off from God. If we made this decision, there are some things we're going to have to do to carry out this decision. And in the inventory process, we inventoried our grosser handicaps. We inventoried our resentments. We alcoholics is the number one offender that blocks us off from God. You know, God really just can't work with a person real good that's off in a resentment. In fact, nobody else can. He can't do too much for himself. Because when we have a resentment, we're paralyzed by that. It's a paralyzing force. It cuts us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. It cuts us off from really doing anything functional in our lives. You know, but we alcoholics seem to get off into that habit. And we list and analyze, and we see what the damaging factor of this and how much we have done it. We also put down what the things we resent and why we resent them and which part of self was involved. And then we do the same thing with our fears, and we do the same thing with our sex conduct of the past, and then we're on our way. We have identified these things, and now the next process is to go to work on them. So in step 5, we begin to relate these to God, ourselves, and other human beings. And we got a little more down to the exact nature of them. In step 6, we asked God to remove them once we've seen the damaging factor of them, and we became willing to have them removed. In 7, we asked Him to remove them. So really, as we begin to work on ourselves based on these conclusions that we were powerless, and that there was a power. You know, we made this decision to put in step 3, based on 1 and 2, to put God in the center of our lives. And this is the correct, you know, whether we like it or not, we haven't lived that way, but the real fact, the principle of life, that, you know, God is within every human being. It's our conception of God, but there is some sense of directions within each of us. We all have a conscience. We all have a, whatever we want to call it, a soul. We all have some form of guidance, that inner voice that speaks to us. And you know, and we can do as we choose, or we can decide to live with that, or we can combat it as we have been. But it's based on these two alternatives, though, we made a decision that to listen to. We made a decision to use that directions which was in us. And so, for the first time, we become. Our spiritual life is in the right way it should be. And then in 4, 5, 6, and 7, we worked on ourselves, our minds. I am a product of what I think. You know, I am a product of the stock in trade. Whatever we are today is the results of it wasn't what just accidentally what happened but outside of our lives. It's what happens within our minds. I am a product of of the thoughts that I have each day. So in 4, 5, 6, and 7, based on this decision, we're working on recreating a new life. Because, you know, the doctor said we become restless, irritable, and discontent. And if we remain the same person, you know, we become a whole lot of other things. We alcoholics, we become lonely, we become upset, and you just go on and on. If I had a bunch of things happen to me, you know. But when these things got to me, then I was powerless, so I made a decision to drink. You know, and alcohol relieved this. So it's all about putting this life back together again. And we said a personality change sufficient to recover, and this is already happening. You know, once he says, you know, we begin to develop some tolerance and patience and goodwill toward all men. And throughout these steps, we see some personality changes take place. Step 5 is the beginning of the spiritual experience. And we have some gradual change throughout here already. But then once we complete that area, then we come tonight into the final area that we have to work on. And this is our relationship with others. This is ourselves. And of course, this is God. God, ourselves, and others. And that's what human life is all about. You know, life does have a design, and each and every life is one's relationship with God. It's one's mind, and it's one's relationship with the world, the people in it. Now, there are 3 dimensions of human life, and I never could get my life in order, and I had in fact, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know much about it. But I worked on what was obvious. This outer circle, we don't know why we talk about steps 8 and 9, because we alcoholics are expert in that area. Of because that's the only area we live in. You know what I mean? That's the only area we live in. We haven't looked and never thought about our spiritual life. You know, we never grew up at all. And this is why we had to come as a child. That's what the big book says, come as a child, because we are children there. We have never did any growing there. Yeah. Now, if you don't grow up in here, you know, you haven't built your house on a firm foundation. And you're going to have problems in your mind. You have problems relating to people. You know, that was my earlier idea. I had problems mixing and talking to people. I was shy and I was afraid of people. And I was always comparing, like Clancy said, I compared my insides with their outsides, you know. And so quite naturally, I was so I went and put alcohol in there, and alcohol become a power greater than myself. And I found out when I put alcohol in here, I felt good here, and I could talk to people good. God, you know. And finally, you know, alcohol didn't work. It finally started coming in here, getting in my mind. And then it started getting out here, getting in my outside circle. In fact, it took over the whole thing. And then I tried to start putting the circle back together again. And it was like Humpty Dumpty on the wall. You know, he had a great fall, and I couldn't try to get Humpty Dumpty back together again. And I had a lot of problems. And this outside circle is made up of, when we say physical and our sociological circle, it's made up of everything. It's, you know, it's made up of the job, the wife, the car, the money, bank account, you know, the clothes, the automobile. All these things are in our physiological world. I mean, it's not only our physical bodies, but the other people and the world in which we live. And for many, many years, I tried to, after the thing got in a mess, I tried to straighten up that circle. And of course, a lot of great, some people said, you need to straighten this up first. You know, but Alcoholics Anonymous, we say this is an inside job. We're going to work from the inside out. Because it don't do much good to straighten this circle up unless you build it on something firm. So tonight we're talking about really going to do this for the first time. And when I had problems, the first time I tried to do this before I come to the program, before I did these other things, I always try to straighten this circle up. You know, I would get my job back and the wife would be gone. I'd have the car, but the wife would be gone. And I'd get the wife back and the job would be gone. And I have the car. Next thing I'll get the wife and the job and the car would be gone. You know what I mean? You know, I never could get, and then people, some idiots say, you ain't trying. Yeah. Hell, I tried like hell. It's a job, you know, all those things. But then, you know, in this program, once we get from work from the inside out, and that's what the program's all about, you know, once we get our spiritual life together, we can develop our mind, we can build our minds together. We can get rid of some of those old things, those old forces that's dominating our lives. And then slowly we'll build this. Now tonight we're going back to do this outside circle. And step 8 says we've made a list of the people we have harmed. And it says we should have did this when we took step 4, and we did, I think. You know, I had a lot of the people on my list, and as we go through our resentments, and we do our resentments the way the big book outlines it, you know, we actually will see a lot of the same people on our resentment list that will be on the people that we owe amends, because we set the ball rolling. You know, I have one that I always like to share that we think it's legal to resent your mother-in-law. You know, I had one of those, you know. We played that joke, but this was a fine lady. And I remember the years of sickness, I could just churn this over in my mind and how it used to make me mad. And as I inventoried that, and as I went across what she done, I put a name down, and I put the cause down, and then I traced the cause to what part of self did she affect? Well, it was very obvious. She had interfered with my personal relationships. You know what I mean? She had interfered with my self-esteem. You know what I mean? She had interfered with my prestige, everything. She had interfered with with my security, my financial security, and my emotional security. She interfered with my sex life. Every part of self this woman has struck. And for many years now, I had resented the hell out of her. And I mean, I just loved to set up and play that over. You know what I mean? And say, I'm going to do this. And you know how we do plan, never do it. Just plan what we're going to do. Never works out that way. And think about the many hours I squandered in my life. Yeah. And I could always see, by playing it over, I was always able to resent her. And all those many years, I had completely excused myself. Completely never excused myself. In fact, I think the main reason of playing the resentment was to cover up for myself. But we put that down and inventoried it and analyzed it. My book said, did not you set the ball rolling? And I can honestly look at it now, and it was my actions. It was my selfishness, my inconsideration, you know what I mean? My dishonesty toward her daughter and my family that made that woman retaliate against me. So instead, once we analyze that, that's not a resentment anymore. Once we analyzed that, he said we should have made that list when we took step 4. That my mother-in-law was quite obviously not a person that I should resent. It was a person that I owed unto men. See? So we should have made that list of a lot of the people that I had, a lot of my fears. Like the guy said, I feared the Internal Revenue. The hell, I owed them a man. I stole from them. If I had stole from them, I never would have had to fear. So once we listed and analyzed these things, we've got a list made. And they said we make a list of the people we have harmed. And if we don't do this, if we don't do this step, our book says, remember, we promise that we'll go into any length. And if we don't, this is a total program. There's no way you can do 2/3 of the steps. It's a total process. There's no way you can say, like people say, well, I got drunk, what happened? Which step did I miss? I said, well, you must have missed all 12 of them. I mean, you can't take one out that you missed. You missed the whole thing, So the rest of the work, all the work, I don't care how much work we did and how good, all of it would be wasted if we didn't do 8 and 9. See, because if we didn't clean up the wreckage of the past, if we don't go out and clear up these things at step 8 and 9, then they're going to back up into the mind. We're going to have guilt and remorse and shame. We're going to be looking over our shoulder. We're going to have fears. These things are going to creep back in the mind. They're going to cut us off from the sunlight and the spirit, and we're going to drink again. So, you got to do all the program. So now, we go out, and he says, we got this list. We made it when we took step 4. And we can look around our lives, and we can see if anyone else that we harmed for any other reason. We can add this. We can get those names off of the inventory sheet. The people that we set the ball rolling, we can see those. If we have any other people that were to harm in any other way, we can add them on the list. And the key thing is the first step, and a lot of people have problems with this step. And I think the biggest problem with step 8 is step 9. And there are 2 steps. There are 2 steps, and this is why they have step 8 and 9. First of all, if you do 8 always comes before 9, so let's do 8 first. If we do 8 first, then like 9's real easy. And 8 is a 2-part step too. And if we can just, a lot of people just can't say, well, I'm not going to make amends to anybody. Well, it doesn't say that. The step says make a list of the people. And it's easy enough to do is make a list of the people we have harmed. You don't really have to talk to anybody to make that list. Anybody can sit down and make a list of all the people he has harmed in his life that he can think of. Quite a few guys come to me and say, well, I can't think of them. I say, well, if you can't think of them, you don't need to write them down, because they surely ain't bothering you if you can't think of them. But once we get that list, then it says become willing to make amends to those people. How do we become willing? Now there are certain people on our list that we can divide this list into 4 areas. Okay. And there are certain people on there that are real close to us, maybe like a mother, usually, or maybe our children, or maybe our grandmother, those type of people. Not our wife, maybe. She won't go on here. Or our husband. But probably the grandmother, everybody would like to make amends to grandma. That's easy. Or the little kids. Or maybe to our mother, who we don't do any wrong by her anyway. I don't care what we do. Oh, he just a nice boy. That's his friends. Guess what? Mama never sees anything wrong. That's what Al Capone's mother said, Now, so it's easy to go to those people, and there's no problem in making amends to them. And what's wrong with it? So we go to them right now. So let's put now up here. And let's put all those people on this list that we're ready to go to right now. The easy ones, right? There's nothing wrong with working up to these things. There's some other people, remember we got the list made out, and there's some other people that we don't want to make them right now. I know I'm going to make it, but I don't know, it may be right now, but maybe later. So we'll put that up here later, right? And we'll put those on the later list. And then we got some other people here. We know we're going to make them, but I may and I may not. So let's put them in the maybe, right? Maybe. And we got a few maybes, a few laters. And then those SOBs that we ain't gonna never make amends to. Let's put them 2 or 3 on the never list. Now, if you do it this way, it will enable you a way to get started.